So we do have a pretty big update to get into here in this video, starting with the PSVue exploit for the PS4. So of course, unless you've been living under a rock, we got the release of the PSVue jailbreak for the PS4, which works up to firmware 13.00. The downside was that it was very unstable. We're talking about a 5% success rate when loading the exploit using the poops kernel exploit, which is the kernel exploit that you have to use if you're above firmware 12.02. So 12.50, 12.52, and 13.0 were very unstable when ran using this exploit. However, that situation has completely changed with the latest version, Vue After Free version 1.4, with the main change here being stability improvements added to the net control exploit by EarthOnion. And these improvements make the exploit significantly more stable with the poopsploit. So this version does include the system backup, so you can restore it on retail consoles to get the latest version installed. And it also has the manual installation method. So if you're updating from a previous version, you can connect to your console via FTP and then simply go into the user folder, the download folder 00960, I believe it is, for the PSVue application, and then copy that download 0.dat file that you downloaded from this version into that folder and overwrite the existing file that's in there. And that will install the new version. So how much of an improvement does this actually make? Well, the improvement is huge. It is a huge improvement. So Zeko's reporting about a 70% success rate, although I'm not sure if it's quite that high, but it's definitely a hell of a lot higher than it was previously, where it was about a 5% success rate and people were having to run it 20 or 30 times just to get it to load successfully once. Well, with my own tests, I ran it 7 times. The first time I ran it, it failed. When it fails, it tends to get stuck on arbitrary read-write or setting up arbitrary read-write. It usually gets stuck there if it is going to fail. And then the second time I ran it, it was successful. It loaded no problem on the second attempt. Third attempt also was successful. Fourth attempt also successful. 3 successful runs in a row with the poops kernel exploit. That would be completely unheard of with the previous version, with the previous stability. So 3 times in a row it ran successfully. 5th time was a failure, 6th time was a failure, and then the 7th time was a success as well. But that's not the only improvement though, because it now runs the kernel exploit a lot faster when it is successful. It loads in just a couple of seconds like the lapsed kernel exploit, whereas of course the previous version, you'd be waiting a long time on the PSVue application after selecting the jailbreak option. On the rare occasion when it did work, it would still take a long time. You'd be waiting quite a while before it would work, before it would load. Whereas this version, it's just a couple of seconds and it's loaded just like the lapse exploit with PSVue. So a massive improvement has been made. I'd go as far to say as this exploit is definitely usable now on 12.50, 12.52, and 13.0, and might even be worth switching from the Blu-ray exploit on 12.50 and 12.52 over to this, because it's just generally easier to run and now loads a lot faster as well. So a massive improvement there to the PSVue application. So we also got the release of GoldHEN version 2.4b18.9, which is mainly to add support for 13.0, which is the new firmware that is now jailbreakable thanks to the PSVue exploit. So we did not have GoldHEN support on that firmware before, but now we do. So besides 13.0 support, we also have fixes added for the MC4 cheat parser, also fixing Linux kernel execution support, and fixing the Orbis toolbox support as well. So mainly fixes as well as support for 13.0 in this version. You can go ahead and download it from Sistro's Ko-Fi page. And to get your GoldHEN payload updated with the PSVue exploit, all you need to do, of course, is simply open up the 7-zip file for GoldHEN in 7-zip or WinRAR and extract the goldhen.bin file to the root of your USB drive and rename it to payload.bin. Make sure you go to View, Show File Name Extensions, make sure that's ticked so you can ensure the file name is correct. And you also need to make sure your USB drive is formatted in exFAT or FAT32 format. And once you've confirmed all that, you can plug that USB drive into your PS4, run the PSVue jailbreak, and then once it jailbreaks the console, it should detect the payload on the USB and copy it to the data folder on the hard drive so that the next time you load it, it will load this new version of GoldHEN whenever you go to load the jailbreak in future. And that will get you updated to the latest version of GoldHEN, which you can now use if you're on firmware 13.0. Now I do have a couple of updates for the PS5 that I wanted to bring you. We also got the release of a new firmware update for the PS5, bringing the latest firmware up to 12.70. where they've just said that they've improved system software, performance, and stability. But just because they don't explicitly mention security fixes does not necessarily mean they have not patched something. So obviously stay on as low a firmware as possible and do not update if you want to be able to jailbreak. So first of all, we got this UFS2 tool by Sven GDK. So this tool allows you to take your PS5 game dump folders and turn them into a ffpkg or UFS2 image, which allows you to mount them and run them on the console. So the idea is that it's just one file for your game dump instead of a folder that has thousands of files in it. You can just have it as one file, which makes it easier for copying it over. In fact, I did this to Astrobot just to see, when I do this to Astrobot, how long does it take to copy the game over? Astrobot has, I think, hundreds of thousands of files in the game folder. So when you copy that over, if you're using FTP, it can take a really long time because of processing all of those files. Certain files can fail to copy over and then the game ends up being corrupted. So using this tool, I was able to convert Astrobot into one of these UFS2 images, and it really didn't take a long time, to be honest, despite how large Astrobot is. Now, the final file turns out to be larger, 170 gigabytes, with the fast FTP server payload from the PS5 payload dev repo. Using that FTP server and copying it over to my M.2 drive internally on the console, you can see the speed of the transfer on a wired connection is reaching 100 plus megabytes per second. And it reports that the game is only going to take about 26 minutes to transfer over, compared to an hour and a half to 2 hours normally with the game folder that has hundreds of files inside. So it can definitely be worth converting your games into UFS2 images so that you can transfer them over quicker and more reliably, because you can transfer them over with FTP as just one file, and that way it's less likely there's going to be different files that end up failing to transfer and then you end up with a corrupted game. The tool is fairly straightforward to work. It is a command line tool, but there is a graphical user interface version coming. But for now, you can use the command line tool. You just open up a command prompt in the same location as the executable. You type in the name of the executable and then new fs, and then the file path to your game dump folder, and then the output location of your converted file. And then you just go ahead and run it and it will handle everything for you, generate the UFS2 image of your game, and you can then put that on a USB or transfer it over to the internal storage. And then when you use the shadow mount payload that has the UFS2 feature built in, it will automatically detect the game and mount the UFS2 image, and you'll be able to launch it. The only downside I've seen from this so far, and it could be because I'm using an older version of the shadow mount with the UFS2 support, is that it takes a little bit longer to actually launch the game when you have it in a UFS2 image like this, compared to just the extracted files. Now, the other thing that's come out for PS5 is that there's a new pre-beta from VoidWhisper of VoidShell. Now, VoidShell is the successor to Shadow Mount, so it's basically got Shadow Mount functionality built into it. It kind of reminds me a bit of Webman for the PS3, where you have a web panel where you can basically control your console remotely and be able to do lots of different functions on your console from this web panel. So this is only for testing purposes at the moment, so just bear that in mind if you are going to try this out. Don't be surprised if there are some things that don't work or if there are some bugs, because this is a pre-beta and it is only for testing. You can download it here from VoidWhisper's Ko-Fi page. All you need to do is load the VoidShell payload on your console. So you can use your PS5 autoloader folder and just copy it in there and change the autoload.txt file to load the VoidShell payload. And then once you have the jailbreak running and the VoidShell payload has been loaded, the next step is that you need to copy the index.html file to a certain location on your console storage, so you can connect remotely via FTP to your PS5, and then simply head into the data folder and then the VoidShell folder, which will have been created when you run VoidShell, and then the www directory, and that's where you copy the index.html file to get the web panel working. Then there's also a payloads folder as well. You can go into that folder and copy any PS5 payloads in there, and you'll be able to launch and manage those payloads within VoidShell as well. So to access the web panel for VoidShell, you just need to open up a browser on some device that's connected to the same network as your PS5 itself, and then simply type in the IP address of the PS5 into your web browser with :7007 as the port number, and that will take you over to VoidShell. So this has a lot of useful features that are built in. Obviously, it has the shadow mount functionality, so you can hit the little refresh button there and it will rescan the library and see if you have any additional games added. So it's got that ability. It also tells you your APU temperature, CPU temperature, system uptime, and how many games you have in your library. Okay, so I've got the web panel and the console side by side, so you can see some of the features in action here. So if we want to launch one of our game dumps, I have Astrobot down here. I'm going to hit play. I'm not sure why the icon's not loaded for that one, but I can hit play and it goes to launch it on the console. And there it goes. It is now launching it remotely. And it also pauses KStuff automatically, which is nice. So it's got that built in, so it will disable KStuff for you. And we now have the game loaded. So yeah, there we go. As you can see, we do in fact have the game running. I'll just go ahead and quit out of it for now. So that's one feature. Now beyond that, if we go down, there is also a package installer. So you can put a direct link to a package file and then click install, and it will install it on the PS5 for you. So you can also select any package files or any folders that contain package files for like PS4 applications that you want to install on the PS5 or any PS5 retail packages. So I've gone ahead and selected PT. And you can see it is uploading it straight to the console. So I select the package file. A few seconds later, there we go. Installation is queued successfully. It has been added to downloads. And there it is. It is installing. And that is PT successfully installed. So you can remotely install your package files from here too. You can also run your payloads as well that we put in that payloads folder. And it has the ability to auto-load them. So this could also double as an auto-loader for your payloads. The idea would be that you just have your two payloads in the YouTube Jailbreak autoloader, which would be your KStuff or ETA-hen, and then of course the VoidShell payload, and then any other additional payloads you want to autoload, you could set up in here for VoidShell to autoload them once it's running. And you can also add delays of how many seconds you want it delayed before it loads the payload. So you might want to give one payload time to fully execute before loading another one. And of course, if you just want to be able to inject the payload manually whenever you want to load it, you can just go ahead and click inject payload. And there we go, payload injected, and the payload gets loaded there on the console. So it has so many other useful options as well. For instance, you've got fan control, so you can override the fan control and then adjust your own temperature threshold, and it will adjust the fans based on that temperature threshold. You can disable your notifications. There's a Sentinel Warden protection. You can whitelist certain applications. There's also a blacklist for games and a custom scan path, one per line. So if you have a different location that you want to keep your games stored on the internal storage or on an M.2 drive on the console, then you can add that file path so that VoidShell will scan that location as well. So yeah, anyway, that is the general idea with this. Again, it is still in testing. There are going to be bugs at the moment because this is just a test build. It is meant for testing. It's not meant to be used primarily at the moment, but this gives us a nice preview of how this payload is developing. And I also just put Minecraft back on my USB drive, plugged it into my console. This is just the normal game dump, not the UFS 2 version. And you can see there, as soon as I plug the USB drive back in, it initiates the rescan, detects that I've added another game dump, and then it creates the shortcut for us. So the exact same functionality that you get with Shadow Mount is included here in VoidShell as well. So you have the regular Shadow Mount features plus all of the new stuff that's been added here in VoidShell. But anyway, that's going to do it for this one. So hope you guys enjoyed this video.